The Western Conference is loaded this year with the Thunder leading the odds to win the conference. But don't sleep on the Wolves, the Mavs, and Nuggets, who all have 4-1 odds to make it to the finals. Then there's a bit of a gap between the next group of teams, the Lakers, the Suns, and the Grizzlies. Now, earlier this morning, our friend, NBA reporter Tim Bontemps, released a story on ESPN.com examining what weaknesses 5 Western Conference contenders must figure out right now with training camp less than 3 weeks away. So should we take a peep at those weaknesses? Let's do it. Let's start with the Big Easy. Following being swept out of the first round by the Thunder, the Pelicans shook up their roster by trading for all-star guard DeJounte Murray. But Bontemps is zeroing in on the void in the middle with starting center Jonas Valanciunas heading out east. So, Brian, what is the biggest question you have about the Pels?
Well, it is a big question about whether Zion Williamson is going to be their starting center. That's going to be fascinating as we go through training camp. But their more pressing issue might be a disgruntled Brandon Ingram, who did not come to the team's informal workouts last week. It's almost kind of turned into like a football situation where a guy wants a contract, didn't come to the OTA. The thing about the situation with Brandon Ingram, under the new rules, it is very difficult for the Pelicans to pay him a max level salary. It is also difficult to trade him because there's probably 8 or 9 teams that can't functionally trade for him because of what the rules are, even if they wanted to. And this has led to one of their star players obviously upset, especially if you look at his social media. So they have got to handle that and get Brandon Ingram to at least some sort of content place going into the season, because no matter what his contract is, this is a high-stakes season for the Pelicans, and they need a big year from him.
I mean, Brandon Ingram was the backup plan for so many teams this summer, especially the Philadelphia 76ers. If they didn't get Paul George, they were very interested in trading for Brandon Ingram. And the problem when you know that, when people have reported on that, is that Brandon Ingram knows that, right? He's thinking about, well, they don't want to pay me, and they were thinking about trading me, and now I have to show up and act like everything's fine. And I think Brian's right. I think that is the biggest issue because Zion can play the center position. I mean, he can be in that spot. They got Daniel Tice. They drafted a couple of guys and young guys in that position. But I think, you know, they've got such a collection of talent, but one of their top 2 guys now is going to be disgruntled. And I don't see a way out of this other than just paying him, which would then put them in a very precarious situation going forward with the rest of the roster.
Well, Zion can play center. The question is, can you build a functional defense with Zion Williamson at center and no traditional big man? And with Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones and DeJounte Murray in the fold and Trey Murphy III, yeah, they can switch a lot and maybe make it work. And by the way, Trey Murphy III is up for an extension. That's going to be a big deal when it happens, whenever it happens. And that's one of the reasons why keeping Brandon Ingram on a huge contract might be untenable for the Pelicans going forward. But look, Brian mentioned that 8 or 9 teams or whatever he said can't even functionally trade for Brandon Ingram if they wanted to because of the second apron and all the aprons we live with now. There's also a bunch of teams, the rebuilding teams, a lot of them are kind of looking at the draft this year and next year and Cooper Flagg and all the great prospects that are coming. They don't want to use their assets to get a player like Brandon Ingram who's going to make them 4 or 5 or 6 wins better, wins that they maybe don't want at the expense of their lottery odds. This is going to be a tough situation for New Orleans to wiggle out from, and they just feel like a team that made one big move with DeJounte Murray and felt like they had another big move coming, and it hasn't happened yet.
And I feel like there's some recency issues based off of the playoffs because he only averaged 14 points per game on 35% shooting. I always feel like I'm so excited for him every year to take the next step to fulfill potential BI, but it seems like he sometimes leaves things to be desired. While there may be some questions about the 5 out in New Orleans, there aren't any questions about that center position, the actual 5 position in Denver. But that doesn't mean that the Nuggets don't have concerns. The 2023 champs got bounced out of the playoffs in the second round, and then they saw, I love this guy, the glue guy, KCP head down to Orlando. Russell Westbrook, though, is on the way, but that doesn't feel like the cure to what Bontemps sees as their biggest issue, 3-point shooting. So, Zach, what is your biggest concern for Denver?
Exactly that. They were last in 3-point attempts last season, and one of their best 3-point shooters, not a big high-volume guy in KCP, he left. In his spot is going to be Christian Brown, who's less proven as a 3-point shooter. Russell Westbrook is not a 3-point shooter, and I'll just leave it at that. There's a certain line somewhere, even if you have Nikola Jokic, probably the best player in the world. even if Jamal Murray rediscovers his form and gets healthy, even if you have that pick and roll combination, there's a line. And if your three-point attempts are below that line in 2024, 2025, it's really hard to win 4 playoff series. And Denver is really close to wherever that line is. And whether it's Julian Strawther making a leap and taking more threes, Michael Porter Jr. going from 7 threes a game to 10, they've just got to get more threes up one way or another.
Well, Julian Strawther shot 11 threes a game in Summer League, Zach. He has 28 points a game in Summer League, but 11 threes a game. I mean, it's like the coach just said, keep shooting, man, and he did it. So they're just going to have to count on these young guys. They've left themselves in that position where, and they haven't sorted through the Jamal Murray extension yet. Obviously, that's something they'll have to work through. But in terms of the rest of the roster, Denver has won because of its depth. Well, they don't have as much depth now with KCP leaving. They have to count on these young guys. They have to rely on player development, and that's tough for a guy like Jokic to swallow because he is in the prime of his career, ready to win now, and this window they have open is only going to stay open for a few years.
You didn't think we were going to go a full show without mentioning the Lakers, did you? Because the Lakers, they fired Darvin Ham after getting bounced by the Nuggets in the first round last year, and then they hired J.J. Redick to replace him as head coach. Now, LeBron and AD both dominated overseas in Paris, but Tim Bontemps still thinks that the team needs help in terms of two-way wings. So, Ramona, what is the main thing keeping the Lakers from contention?
It's just defense in the backcourt. I know they got Gabe Vincent because last year as their top free agent signing, and he didn't play most of the year because of a knee injury. But he's smaller, and he's not seen as a guy who's going to be this 3-and-D guy with the long arms like Taurean Prince, who they let go. And I know Laker fans always like to knock Darvin Ham for starting Taurean Prince all year, but he's the kind of guy that they needed. Now, they have to hope Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, who were injured for most of last year, are able to come back and give him that foot speed and give him that length on the perimeter, because Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell are offensive-minded. They were the 6th worst defensive duo in the backcourt among all NBA guards last year.
Yeah, that's the issue, Ramona. The 2 best guards that they have offensively are bad defensively. And that's why I think you may see more out of Max Christie. The Lakers' biggest investment in a free agent, well, I guess you could say LeBron, that was a pretty big investment, but was re-signing Max Christie. And I don't think they're going to get defense from Dalton Connect, although I do think he will have an interesting role. But, you know, Max Christie is going to get an opportunity. They believe in him. They want to develop him. And so I think that's why Bontemps has this on the list. He's not sure about Max Christie yet, but maybe Max Christie will be the answer. The Lakers need that.
Wait, the Lakers need a 3-and-D wing? The Lakers need a 2-way wing? The Lakers can get in line with pretty much every other team in the league, maybe other than the Celtics, the Pelicans, and a few others. Everybody needs a 2-way wing. They're so hard to find. They're so hard to develop. And Brian said a name in his answer that I think is very important for them this year and going forward. Max Christie. They paid him $8 million a year. That was $8 million they could have spent elsewhere, an exception they could have spent elsewhere. They didn't. He's an interesting young player. He's a 6'6" wing. I'm not saying he's going to be a 30-minute-a-game 3-and-D guy this season. I'm not even saying he's a lock to beat out Dalton Connect for minutes. But they need one of these guys to develop into something, because Gabe Vincent, he's a nice player. He was huge for the Heat. He's undersized. He's not really a wing. Jared Vanderbilt, great defensive player. We've seen it before. He's going to get played off the floor in the playoffs because nobody guards him. He's not a three-point shooter. Someone is going to have to step into this void, or they're going to have to trade those picks they have sitting there to get a player like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zach, except for how do you do a trade when you're like this much under the second apron? Like literally like $40,000. And I think that, you know, we all talked all summer about how LeBron was going to take a haircut to help the Lakers. He took a very, very slight haircut, so they're under the second apron, but they don't have much maneuverability. And I still think they need another big man in addition to upgrading on the perimeter. So I think what you got is what you got.
I'm on fire. It's NBA,